I have put over 60 hours into Legendary Tales, and I am thoroughly impressed with the game. Here I'll try to break down my opinion of the game. Legendary Tales has a few shortcomings, but overall I highly recommend it to anyone who is willing to stand up and play physical VR games. First, let's go over the areas where I think Legendary Tales could use improvement. Character customization is very limited. There are only two player models, a blonde-haired man or a blonde-haired woman. While the avatars are visually decent, it feels a little weird in multiplayer where everyone looks the same. Armor and helmets do alter your appearance for the male, but last I saw, female characters did not have armor models yet, and don't change as you upgrade their gloves and helmets. Monster models are all kind of repetitive as well. There are very few monster types in the game, and even the bosses are very similar to the regular mobs in appearance, usually just in different gear. While the skeletons, goblins, bats, zombie-like hollows, hell raiders are all well-made models, you definitely feel a lack of variety as you play. No voice actors. When you get quests, there's a string of dialogue pop-up windows that follow the initial quest, except pop-up. I feel like this system works well and also allows you to skip through when you are deep in the action or on a second playthrough and don't care to reread the dialogue. A very small gripe, but something I feel is worth mentioning, is that I ran into a decent amount of invisible walls. They really seem to mainly only be present in cave systems in the game, but sometimes shooting an enemy that you can clearly see becomes impossible because of an invisible barrier around a rocky surface. I've even found a couple places where ore wasn't retrievable because it was stuck in invisible walls. Now let's go into what makes the game great. The combat mechanics for melee, shield, and archery in this game are awesome. You can even slap and punch enemies in very convincing mechanics. Magic is gesture-based, which is pretty cool, and seems to work well for the few hours where I experimented with it. If you have a wand equipped, you can just fire off missiles with the trigger button, which seems to use eye tracking to indicate your target, but I could be wrong. Either way, it's very intuitive. Sneaking works very similar to the way it does in Skyrim VR, where you have an opening and closing eye symbol that tells you when you are hidden and if someone is detecting you. Swinging a sword seems to be based on the length of the swing and the speed, and applying a slight counter swing to a parry or sword block has a larger impact. A bow's trajectory is affected by how far you draw the bow. Strength builds are a pretty good workout. I found myself really sweating and breathing hard as I played with a sword and shield. Archery and hiding-based builds are a little less intense, but still require a lot of movement. With the mage, I found that I just use my wand for most mobs. Some gesture-based spells for bigger baddies, however, mage felt relaxing to me after having tried other builds. Everything works well and feels great, and for me this has been where Legendary Tales literally outshined every other game I have ever played in VR. Leveling, customization, and progression works on a few different mechanics. Every attack you do will level the trait that the action uses. So if I hit someone with a sword, I level strength. Where hitting them with a bow levels dexterity, and hitting them with a spell levels intellect. This means that you have to be deliberate about what weapons you use throughout the game if you want to build a class according to a plan. Wisdom, luck, and vitality are leveled on point-based systems where you can apply your point where you want to. There is also a talent tree system that gets pretty detailed, allowing you to put earned skill points in whatever class or even cross classes you want. Magic has its own pages, focusing on fire, frost, and shock damage, and a few extra abilities for protection. Strength and dexterity have their own talent trees, and there is a secondary talent tree utilizing luck, vitality, and wisdom points. Then there is a trait tab where you can find more role-specific trees, such as archery tree, a tree utilizing shield or sword, or two-handed weapon builds, or hiding talents, etc. I have made a tanky sword and board fighter, an archer, a dual dagger rogue, a mage, and I'm currently making an assassin archer that uses a cross between bow and hiding skills. A friend of mine is focused on using two-handed weapons, and it really feels like you can build whatever you want. I have even heard of people building monk-style characters that don't use weapons at all. Dungeons and world layout is much bigger than it first seems. The world map is kind of circular, leading you to the dungeons in order progression. There are waypoints scattered throughout the world map, and each dungeon has its own separate waypoint system available. Nothing in this game is procedurally generated. Everything was designed and feels well thought out, and you definitely feel progression as you go, not only in leveling, but in the combat techniques the enemies use, their gear, and the boss fights. As I played through the game the first time, I kept finding myself shocked that the game was still going. The dungeons all feel pretty large and have memorable areas. The bosses you encounter throughout the game all have their own unique attack styles and abilities and require different strategies. Beating any of the bosses always feels like an accomplishment. There are also many bosses sprinkled around the dungeons that have much larger health point bars and usually an extra ability. Typically, bosses are surrounded by a small entourage of regular mobs. You can make your own weapons, potions, and even cook the meat you find while exploring. The crafting system involves an alchemy pot that you can drop crafting materials in to upgrade them. You can use magic power to enhance items and can even craft legendary weapons if you have earned the currencies needed to buy the materials to make them. There is a gambling system unlocked in the early part of the game as well. Items can be sold or broken down and recycled into crafting materials. You can even enhance potions with magic dust. The metalworking and handle grinding mechanics are pretty good and reminiscent of the game A Township Tale, but not quite as elaborate. The legendary items have unique abilities, and the game does a good job of inspiring you to try and collect a full set. Legendary items are a bit more accessible in this game than most games of this type, as you can craft them, gamble for them, buy a random one at the merchant, or they can rarely be dropped by enemies or chests. And you even might get a low-level one here or there as a quest reward. You can't craft gloves or helmets, and it requires hard-earned honor points, so it will probably take a full playthrough or longer to get it fully kitted in legendary gear, but it never feels like an impossible task. The legendary item's special abilities can also be leveled up, using honor points instead of skill points to unlock the next tier level for each legendary ability. This game can be played solo or multiplayer, and it is easy to join other players or allow other players to join you. It was a little buggy when trying to let my friend join my game on the day of launch, and I'm not sure if that's been fixed, but we have always been able to make it work eventually. I did find at my personal skill level I was unable to solo bosses after the 4th dungeon. That may have been due to my build limitations or just a lack of skill, but I also saw that that was around when other people were opening their games up to multiplayer. Replayability is high as there is a challenge mode available after beating the game that restarts the game with all of the enemies set at a much higher difficulty, as well as a permadeath mode, which honestly has me nervous. Beyond that, I feel like it is impossible to play this game without feeling the impulse to try a different class and see how they feel. I have already built 4 classes myself and still have more variants I want to try. The campaign will probably take 15 to 20 hours to beat the first time, and will probably take over 10 hours to beat even after you know the game well. But I have over 60 hours in the game because I keep rolling new characters and want to try new builds. While this game has a price tag of $55 US, it feels like a AAA title and is worth every penny. I would easily give this game a 9.5 out of 10, and if there was a bit more character customization, voice actors, and a few more monster models, that would have been a full 10 out of 10. This is a new YouTube channel, and I'm still trying to get a feel for making videos. If you enjoyed this video and would like more reviews like this, please like and subscribe. If you would like to see a certain title reviewed or have an idea for my channel, feel free to drop a comment. Thank you for watching, and game on.